Hey, Adam, thanks for joining us today. As we're getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Hey, thanks, Brian. I'm excited to be on this podcast. Love watching your videos on LinkedIn. I am a director of sales for a company called A Plus Tree. We do commercial tree care service from San Diego to Seattle and in Salt Lake City. And my job is to lead our sales team and bring in revenue for our Southern California market. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've been in this industry constantly for 20 years, um, and have just grown and learned a lot about this particular service.
And how'd you get interested in it?
So I didn't.
You did.
Yeah, this is. I just kind of fell into this. Actually, I was in school getting my degree in psychology, and I originally wanted to become either an industrial organizational psychologist or a marriage family therapist because of how much I love people, but also how fascinated I am by factors that increase our performance and motivate us. But in my last year of college, my wife got pregnant. We had just got married, and um, I got her pregnant. No one else is responsible for
Hopefully.
that. Yeah, it's so funny. People say my wife got pregnant, but like it's some big mystery how that happens, or who's responsible. And she had a high risk pregnancy. Our daughter was an cardiac twin, and so I needed to wrap up school and start providing for the family because she was bedridden and couldn't go back to work. And my goal was to go on to graduate school and
Oh,
get my master's. So I was in leadership at my church, and there was a guy who was part of our social circle who was selling for a tree care company. And at the time, this was in the early 2000s, he was driving a decked out Ford Expedition that was a company car, had a cell phone, making about $70,000 a year. And the job was pretty cush. He was working from home, sometimes went into this office, got to walk around a lot looking at trees. And at 25 years old, making $70,000 a year and having all those perks and insurance benefits and stuff like that looked pretty attractive.
I bet.
So we were talking, and he said, you would be pretty good at selling in this industry. You want to see what it's like? And I said, yeah, sure. So I took a job and naturally gravitated to it quickly, and I've been doing it ever since. I've worked for 4 different tree care companies, and interestingly enough, my position in each one of them has really been to build divisions. And so my first company, I built a division where they were doing $600,000 of municipal work in San Diego, and in 3 years grew it to a $3.2 million division. Was hired on by another company who was starting up and had about $200,000 in contracts, and brought in $750,000 worth of work the first year, and grew the company to a $5 million company in just about 9 years. And now I am at A Plus Tree. I got hired on to build their Southern California market in 2016, and we're doing about $5 million of work in Southern California, and it's been a really exciting ride. This company is hands down the best company I've ever worked for. Our CEO is absolutely amazing, and part of doing sales, I've also just done a lot of sales leadership, and so I'm really passionate about the subject. I've learned a lot about the science of sales, and have studied it quite a bit. And it's just one of my favorite things to teach people, and I really enjoy doing it as a career.
Well, it kind of is an extension of psychology, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. There's so much psychology in selling,
Yeah.
and I think that one of the things that we miss a lot, and that our sales leaders don't teach us, and possibly because they don't know, is how much psychology there is in sales and how much you can get out of a conversation by being aware of the psychological factors and the dynamics that are at play in the conversation. Even as simple as how you ask questions, right? Whether you're using why as a question, and being aware that that's probably something we want to get creative around and not use that word because it creates a defensive posture. And when we're putting our client in a defensive space, we're making it so they're less likely to share information with us. They don't feel safe and comfortable with us. We start to diminish trust. and it happens just from one word.
Well, that's it, because we have to be professional communicators. And a lot of people like very direct answers to questions. Other people want, vague answers. And I did a poll on LinkedIn because I find salespeople just as indecisive as customers. And I
Well,
asked,
yeah.
do you find it easy, or are you good at answering simple yes or no questions?
Yeah, I saw that poll. I responded to it and I said, I don't know what that means. A question can't get any more simple than yes or no, but we don't want to ask simple questions, right? Like, you want to use a closed-ended question purposefully. The open-ended questions are really, really challenging to
Right,
ask
but
because
but
you have to be
customers
thinking
ask
about it.
questions too.
Yeah, they do. They do.
And if they say, do you cut trees?
Well, sure, I cut trees.
Yeah, right.
We do a lot. We do a
Is that
lot
tree
more than
dead?
that. What do you mean by
Yeah,
cutting? What does it mean to cut a tree?
right. And what I find is, it's not that they just can't answer it. It's just this overuse of "it depends," which isn't an answer. It's a kind of a critique on your question.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I've actually never really thought about it like that, Brian. As a critique on the question.
Yeah,
Well,
because
that's
right, because
poignant.
it's kind of a way to get off the hook without thinking.
Right. Right. One of the things about those closed-ended questions, though, when you give an answer, it is a commitment. And that's what I like about the use of closed-ended questions when you use them, is that you really are asking for a committed answer.
Yeah. And my point with it was, customers do ask sometimes yes or no questions, and sometimes they just want a yes or no. Would you like
Yeah.
coffee? Okay. They don't want
Yeah.
a conversation about coffee. They just want to know, do you want one?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I don't know. Are you gonna have some? Um,
What kind?
uh,
They say, yeah, I just had one.
I
Right.
was reading this poll that Gong did. I think you shared it. You may have shared it. And the poll was showing how the amount of questions that you ask in a conversation has diminishing returns. And I think
Yes.
that it talked about how customers will hang in there and be engaged for 3 to 4 questions. And as you start to ask more questions, their interest and the success of closing a deal goes down drastically.
Yeah, because sales is a conversation, not an interrogation.
Right.
And I think,
Right.
it's good to have great questions, but we're not the judge of them. The client's the judge of them.
Amen to that.
And if they're good questions, you could be 50, doesn't matter. But if they're the standard, oh, do you have budget? What's your time frame? Who else are you looking at? Those get boring really quickly because they're not adding anything to the client.
No, they're not, and they're not helping the client discover the importance of what they're working with
Trying to
you on
accomplish.
either. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
gotta believe you're in a space that they absolutely want to commoditize you.
Oh my gosh, it's one of the most challenging things about our space is how easily we're commoditized. And the other tough part about our space, Brian, is the perception that people have about our service. I was talking to somebody the other day, and he was sharing about what his mechanic charges him hourly, and says, he's had some services. Yeah, it's going to take $163 an hour is our fee to do it. Where customers in our industry, in my market, they sometimes don't want to pay any more than $85-$90 an hour. And and I have those conversations, I'm just thinking, do you not understand what we're doing? We've got guys who are climbing 60, 70, 100 feet in the air with a piece of equipment that's motorized. It can cut your arm off if it goes in the wrong direction. If their rope breaks, they fall to their death, and they're hurting their body every single day. The guys on the ground are literally moving tons and tons of material from point A to point B, and you don't think that that's harder work than
And
the
what
mechanic
happens if
working on your
that
car?
tree or branch falls in a direction that you didn't plan for?
Yeah. Oh, and that happens too. And the kind of damage that it can cause property or people that it can injure that aren't even, part of part of the tree care operation. It's dangerous work. And it's also one of the things that clients budget for last. One of the least important things that property managers are paying attention to and prioritizing. And it's very difficult to educate them when that culture in their thinking has existed for as long as property management has existed.
Right, because I got to believe, because a lot of it is preventative,
Yep.
because where I live, last year we had this bad windstorm and all these old trees fell down,
Yeah.
like 100-year-old big trees. One fell onto a house.
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden, all the streets were blocked with tree service companies cutting down old dead trees.
Yeah.
And I made a video about it because it went from latent pain to active pain.
Yep. And and that's how it is. It's a very reactive industry, and I guarantee you the guys who've been in that neighborhood, who have been either talking to the city or talking to people, have been telling them for years, you really need to look at these trees. You really need to do something about it. One of these days, one of these trees is going to fall, and it's either fall in a car or a house or into a telephone line or an electric line.
Yeah.
And
these were, good, almost 2.5, 3 feet wide trees.
yeah.
So
And there's nothing stopping me either. They just full impact.
Right. So you're talking a lot of weight hitting, a 30-year-old roof. It went right into their bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah. They're lucky to be alive.
They're lucky to be alive. And it could have split the house down the middle.
Yeah.
So what's the hardest part of your sale?
Getting the conversation outside of price. It's getting it outside of price. And getting the scope of work to not be stuck in an apples to apples scope. Our industry has many different kinds of service providers. There's guys who have a pickup truck and a chainsaw and might have insurance, and they go around and they say, I'll trim your tree for whatever. And it's very vague. Then you have companies like us who hire people with master's degrees in urban forestry, and every single one of our people looking at trees is an ISA certified arborist or higher. And when we go through and we do a full analysis of the trees, our proposals are going to have recommendations that are much more complex and meaningful than one that just has all the trees counted and says trim them all. And it's difficult to get the client to care to have that conversation.
Have you found a way of either doing that or very quickly telling whether or not they can do that, have that conversation?
Yeah, part of that is how they answer just a couple of questions. Some of those questions are, so tell me a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish here. What have you done? What have you done in the past? If I were to fill in the blank, how important would that be to you? And based off of their attention, I mean, sometimes they're not even paying attention. It's like, are you looking at your phone while we're having this conversation right now? But based off of how willing how much they're willing to engage in the conversation with those important questions can really help me determine whether or not this is a deal I'm going to have to figure out how to get creative with pricing, or if this is something where the client's really invested in taking care of their trees.
And who's your ideal customer? Is it a state and local government, a town, a homeowner association? Is it?
So we service various verticals. So we have homeowners association, multifamily, apartments, retail, large shopping centers, commercial office properties and campuses. But so any of those are great. A place where they actually care and take care of the trees. But the ideal person to talk to on the phone for multifamily, for example, would be the asset manager, which is outside of the property management company, the building, the one who actually owns the property. And in some cases, it's just the property manager. So you have to really decide or discover who's ultimately making the decisions. It's not always the CEO, it's not always the regional manager. So you got to figure out who the person is that gets to say yes.
Well, that's it. I made the mistake of getting onto a HOA board.
Yes, you did.
Worst decision of my life.
Worst decision.
Well, you got a
Thankless.
bunch of amateurs, and everyone's got different priorities,
Oh God.
and they only care about theirs.
Yep.
And and I don't know why they always want to go to the lowest bidder, because the money's already allocated.
And
Why
it's
not?
not like it's going to their savings accounts or anything
Right.
like
You
that.
don't
With
get it
HOAs, it's
back.
the
It's not,
worst. Yeah.
it's
It's
not,
there to take care of the community. That's why you have it. It's there. And your reserve study should have shown you what you can do and
right.
how to make
They
your
act like there's going to be a refund at the end of the year if there's not spent. No,
yeah,
it just rolls on to the next year. And if you move, you don't get it back. It
right.
stays there. It's lost money. So you should be maximizing that money to increase the value of the community.
Yeah.
Call me crazy. I think that was the objective.
And you'll see with these decisions about buying low price with trees, especially, sometimes guys will come through and they'll just hack the trees. And what they've done is created decades of change and things that we may not even be able to reverse, creating hazards or ultimately causing trees to die sooner than they naturally would. And you want to talk about not taking care of a community. That's one way to just really destroy a way a
Well,
community can look with their trees for
well,
10,
that's it,
15
because
years.
once the tree is trimmed, you can't put the branch back.
Right. Yep.
It's not like grass where you can just put sod down or mulch or whatever and just
Yeah.
cover it over. A tree, okay, you cut that limb off. And I've seen talented tree people that they, went behind my house and they had a crane and they had the saw and they were just like surgical,
Yeah.
catching the branches and blowing the leaves off the decks and stuff, versus the college kids who was like, what's the quickest, easy way to get this over with?
Yeah. And dangerous doing it that way too. So dangerous.
No.
There's a guy on LinkedIn named Ed Davidson. I don't know if you see any of his videos. He always starts off, there you have it, folks. And,
Oh
he's got
yeah.
a couple of videos where, it's just situational awareness, going too fast, not working with qualified people. And we see that all the time. And it's not uncommon is the thing. It's not uncommon. And Brian, you're not a property manager, you're not an arborist, and it's simple math for you. It's not like this is rocket science to figure out, and yet decision makers still continue to hire contracts like this because our services has been wildly commoditized, and it is something that all service providers that are of high caliber are constantly wrestling with.
And I think everybody who listens to the podcast feels that pain, because I talk to reps, no matter what they sell, it could be a brand new technology. Everybody wants to commoditize everybody else,
Yeah.
because that's why they understand it and they have power. Because if I can pick any, I have power.
It's easy too. That's the
It's
thing. it's
easy.
it's
Yeah.
easy. And to a certain degree, like, I empathize with the property manager, I empathize with any buyer. They've got 1,000 different things going
Yes.
on.
Right.
Their mental headspace is in 1,000 different directions. They want one less thing to have to really like put their mental energy and focus into. And so the trick is, how do you get 5 more minutes of their time? How do you get 10 minutes of their time and not waste it, not waste any of it?
And what would you say is your strongest selling skill?
Building rapport.
Yeah.
Building rapport. And the thing is, I don't know how it happens so quickly, other than I just be myself. When I make a phone call, I realize that I'm just talking to another human being. It doesn't really matter what their title is. They go home, they've got their kids, they've got their worries, they've got their own stresses or things that are bothering them that nobody knows about. I think that's true for everyone, whether it's big or little, but we all deal with a certain amount of inadequacy or need to do better somewhere. And that's a very humanizing thing for me. So when I call somebody and am talking to them about their trees, that connection point and building trust and feeling instantly trustworthy, I just start that off just by being transparent, appropriately vulnerable, and empathetic to, the fact that we have to have this conversation. And I think building that rapport and creating that safe space is really, really valuable, because it makes people want to talk. We're relational human beings. People want to connect with other people too, but they want to feel important, and they want to feel safe. And so I just try to create that, as best as I can.
And how do you teach your reps to do that?
It's a difficult thing to teach.
Yeah.
It's hard to teach, because it requires lots of self-awareness. It requires you to be aware of what's happening inside of you. It requires some real honesty about yourself. And then it really, really requires you to also not be so consumed with yourself, and to really be paying attention and caring about the other person. And that is, I don't think that's something that can be taught. You can tell somebody to be aware of it. You can walk them through some mock conversations and do role playing, which I love. I love that. But at the end of the day, it's something that they need to feel for themselves in the conversation. But I just don't think that there's a textbook on it. It's all through experience and self-awareness.
And have you been able to sense that during the interview process?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And are you talking about this interview or just the interview process?
No,
in
the
general?
job interview process.
Okay. It's like, you seem like a great guy, Brian.
Little do you know.
I feel like you care. But yeah, in the interview process, you can tell, being aware of cadence, right? Being aware of how a client exists in that space of silence, after you're done saying something. Those are ways in which I can tell. And then their willingness to answer the real questions. And once I've asked a real question about their property, or, hey, how important is this to you right now? How much priority have you put into this? When you called me, what were you hoping was going to happen here? And the honesty and the time that they put into answering that question tells me a lot about whether or not they feel this is a safe place to talk. And they'll say all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I really didn't want to have this call. I've got a lot of other things to do. I didn't have time for this, but we have to get it done. Okay.
Yeah, because I can't imagine there's many that are like looking forward to it.
Well, who looks forward to having to buy something unless they really want it, right?
Well, right, because like snow removal is an urgency thing.
Sure.
Right. It needs to be removed now.
Yep.
Tomorrow's too late.
Exactly.
Tree, maybe, if the person's not living there and the tree's not bugging them or not threatening their property or polluting, their lawn or something, or being an obstacle, I think they want the community to look well. I don't think in most cases they want the tree to die. They want them to live and they have shade and beauty.
And then other places, they don't want that. Like, for example, retail centers. A lot of retail centers, their main focus is that their client signage is visible, right? Okay, and so doing something that's really good for the tree isn't the priority. And so there's the client who would just hire somebody cheap who come through and hack the trees, or there's a client like the ones that we work with that want to figure out how can we somehow get both. And when you work with someone like that, it's great because they end up being long-term clients. You develop a lot of trust, and they're willing to tell you exactly what they need. And there's a great way, there's mutual accountability too, which when you have that is fantastic.
And I got to believe that no matter what, you get pinched on price. Let's say they love you, they appreciate the value and the differentiator, but they're still going to say you're too expensive, right?
Not always.
No,
not always. When there are a lot of clients that I have that don't go out to bid on other contractors because they trust us, and I just give them the best price that I possibly can. I give them a good price. I take that very seriously, and so I don't charge them, more than I would. I don't charge them the most amount. I'll probably charge them right there in the middle of where our margin needs to be, because they want us to make money. They want us to be profitable because they know if we're profitable, we're going to do a good job too. But I also make sure that I'm giving them a really good deal and will likely give them a better value proposition than I will for somebody who is just trying to beat me up on price. So it's not going to be cheaper than that, but I will give them better added services.
And how much of the sale is outbound versus people coming to you trying to get a quote or learn about you?
So most of it is outbound until
It
you've
is.
developed your portfolio business. Most of it is outbound. A lot of trade shows, a lot of cold calls. In our industry, people start to get to know each other pretty quickly. If you've been in it for about 3 years and you've done your trade shows and you've done your events with associations, people start to know you really well, because it's a small niche industry. But majority of it is outbound. Every now and then, once people start to know you, they send emails, hey, we need a bid for this, we need a bid for that. But I'd say 75% of it is outbound, maybe 80.
And how do you keep the reps motivated when there's so much outbound? Because you're trying to find somebody at the right time, because it's probably a contract or annual type thing involved.
Yeah, it's annual most of the time. Every now and then a client will want to do a 2 to 3 year deal. Or like we've got a large multifamily client that renews a 2-year deal with us every year, which is great. Those are fantastic. But usually it's an annual bid. And part of that is, you look over years when we do this, but to keep the sales reps motivated to ask your question, part of that is doing sales training with them. When you don't do sales training with your reps and they're just out there to fend for themselves, it's very difficult to motivate them unless you've got a really good compensation package for them.
Yeah.
Right. Because salespeople are motivated by money, and we will take a beating if we know we're going to get compensated really well. Outside of that, you've got to train them. You've got to give them additional skills. You've got to be available for them, give them the space and time to learn, because they want to do well. But when, a lot of times sales guys will just kind of be left to fend for themselves. And, that's, I don't think that we're serving our sales guys very well when we do that,
Right. Yeah, because especially they don't know whether it's them or it's the market or the timing. And I think people want to feel part of something.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And giving them realistic goals.
Yes.
Some of these quotas that companies will put on their sales reps, it's just like, what are you doing to these guys? I mean, like how realistic do you think it is for your reps to hit these just insane target quotas when in the person saying the mind is like, hey, they hit 80%, that's good. It's like, well, why don't set their target for 80% so they have something to measure by? Set it for that one. So they have real success to measure by, other than constantly feeling discouraged, even though you're satisfied with the results.
That is a big mistake that the industry has made over the last 20 years. Because quotas used to be realistic based off of the on-target income.
Yeah.
But now, we're not very smart. So we look at the on-target income, and if one is bigger than the other, we think that job's better. Not necessarily.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think our industry does a pretty fair job of creating some of those goals, but it's when the rep starts to really build a big book of business, and then their next annual goal becomes 20%, 30%. There's going to be a point where in our industry, you can only count so many trees in a day, right? You can only produce so many proposals in a day. There's just a point where that's what you can hit.
Right.
You're not going to sell any more than that. And when their annual goal keeps going up, and when the compensation package changes, and it makes it difficult to hit higher marks, how do you keep a rep motivated?
I'll ask you, when are you more motivated? When you're below quota or when you're above quota?
Yeah, when I'm above quota. When I'm above, people go, well, we need somebody who works in a high pressure situation. Like, okay, well, I'm in sales. Like, how much more? Don't put more pressure on me. Like, it's already a lot of pressure.
That's it. So if you take that part away, then it's because the times I'm super motivated is when I'm above quota in the accelerators.
Yeah.
Not like when I'm 80% struggling and I go, am I going to make it or not? Or that's not nearly as motivating as the confidence you get. I made my number. It's all gravy from here. I've never really seen people go on vacation once they make their quota. People think, oh, they'll
No.
just stop.
Yeah.
It's just the opposite. That's why it's an accelerator.
Yeah. We don't have accelerators in our industry.
You
You
don't?
know, that when I hear people talk about accelerators, I'm like, accelerators? Oh, I
Well,
wish I had accelerators.
yeah. In the software, it's not linear. It's exponential.
Yeah.
So you'll start at 3 and you could get to 15%. So that deal's 5 times more valuable over quota than it is, in the first, segment of
It's like a
quota.
video game, you just get 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x. I mean, what
And
sales
then,
guys have motivated by that?
right. And then January 1st comes and it goes back to 3. So you're
Yeah.
talking about withdrawal like you've never went through withdrawal before.
Yeah. No kidding. So you got to be smart. I mean, you got to be smart with your money too, right? As a sales guy, you got to be disciplined on that,
Yes.
and once you hit those accelerators, great, but just be smart with it. Don't start building your lifestyle on
No, you
15x.
don't. No. Cool. Hey, this has been a great conversation, Adam. Where can people go to follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn. So if you look up Adam Hurd on LinkedIn with A Plus Tree, I'm there. You can look at us at aplustree.com, and my email is adam@aplustree.com. Feel free to reach out. And, Brian, I really appreciate you bringing me onto the show. I really enjoyed this, and I'm a big fan.